starting position would be, what brought you to the Street Epistemology Discord server?
So I got recommended to somebody about Alan Watts, and that led me to some philosophy ideas, which kind of led me, and I was listening to various like college lectures about philosophy, and of course, because Alan Watts is sort of on the religious based, I got recommended some of the ACA channels like Truth Wanted and whatnot, and then eventually led me to Anthony Metabosco's videos, and I thought it was really intriguing, like the methodological usefulness of like the conversation rather than just debating with people.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're studying philosophy at university, or you were at that point?
No.
You were not? Oh, okay. I thought
No.
I heard you.
just listening to lectures. No.
No problem. Yeah, that's cool. It's one of the lovely things about the internet, right? That we can get access to all of this high-level education and don't have to pay a penny. That's cool. So what was it, do you think, that appealed about the conversation style that you saw in Anthony? What do you think was what was making it effective?
The thinking. I think that was like really what caught me on to it, was like how, asking really thoughtful questions, through active listening, and asking the interlocutor really thoughtful questions that made them stop and go like, oh my God, I've never thought about that before. Let me like think about it and then try to answer it. And like, that's something that just seemed so beneficial to me over like the standard, like, let me just give you a counterfactual explanation,
Right, exactly. That's cool. So what's the kind of topics that you like to explore? You mentioned religion. Is that a primary topic of your interest, or you?
Yeah, it is definitely like one of the more primary ones that I'm interested in. I do like exploring like ideas of consciousness with people, and free will, and like science-based claims, and cosmology and such. But and all of those are sort of tied together though too.
It's like the old Wikipedia game that it all gets back to philosophy at some point, right?
Yeah.
So, is there anything particular about religion that what is it about religion, do you think, that's inspired you to be interested in it and want to have conversations about it?
I was raised Catholic, and as I was younger, I kind of got myself out of it. I realized that none of it really made much sense, and it kind of led me down a path of various other supernatural beliefs, Wicca, and then to Buddhism. Not really that I ever followed Buddhism, just kind of I liked some of the ideas of it. And then, during the pandemic and everything, it's like, looking more into like my ideologies, and I realized that like, wait, like people actually like believe this stuff, like really believe this stuff. Like I thought it was just kind of like fable, like people just kind of like, oh, okay, it's Santa Claus. And I didn't realize that the people around me like wholeheartedly believed that like, God magicked the earth into existence.
Yeah, I sympathize with that. So I think I had a similar moment where I kind of thought it was like a Santa Claus story that was just being told to some people, but we all sort of secretly knew it wasn't true. And then, it was kind of strange to me to discover that some people really genuinely not only believed it, but let's just say violently believed it. Have you used SE? Do you feel like you've gone out and done an SE style conversation as of yet, or?
Have I went out and done an SE style conversation? Like explicitly, no. But like it has fundamentally changed how I have a conversation with person, especially when they're if they make a claim. So like I've had what I would refer to as like SE-esque kind of conversations where it's like, oh, that's interesting, and let me like active listening and asking questions. And the idea behind it is like, I've been wrong before, and if I listen and ask good questions, like maybe I have the opportunity to learn.
Right. Yeah, that's nice. And so you're mostly doing this online, just through Discord at the moment. Have you had any like face-to-face interactions where you've applied this approach?
Yeah, I have had a couple of face-to-faces, but with the pandemic, I'm not, really
Sure.
out in the public. But, there was a person at work that was a little bit open to like having their beliefs explored a little bit. It was more general conversation, like I said, SE-esque. And I would say was like my first application of SE outside of like Discord or online.
That's awesome. Did it go well?
Yeah, it definitely led to some questions that like the interlocutor was like, yeah, I've never thought of that before, and it gave him something to think about. And we ended up on another point in time, talking about some of the other ideas. Um, you know.
That's cool.
hmm
How would you describe SE to somebody that's not really seen it done yet, or never come across any of the videos? How do you think you would characterize it?
So I like I like to use the definition of like a epistemology, which basically is like, how do you know what you know, or
Hmm.
the reasonings that you know what you know, and SE is just like the layman's person's way of like applying that to general conversation. So it's like somebody asking you like questions and being an active listener and kind of probing on like how do you came to your conclusion.
Right. How would you characterize the community? And I understand that that's a transient thing, but it's certainly shifted a few times since I've been a part of it. But how would you characterize your experience of the SE community so far?
um Relaxing, civilized, controlled.
Relaxing. That's an interesting.
Yeah. I say that like being in the street epistemology server is like being involved in like a symposium, which is basically like intelligent, respectful conversations. So rather than having like debates, it's like listening to somebody's point and trying to like understand and then talk to them about it and like see where you can go from there.
Right. So what are things that people might want to know about you? You mentioned you grew up Catholic. You've experimented or explored some different religious views. Are there any other characteristics about you that you'd like people to know about, or would be useful to know about for conversation?
Let's see. Well, I mean, it ties to SE, not necessarily. I mean, I'm a rock climber and adventurer. Yeah, I classify myself as a free thinker, very out of the box, away from mainstream, trying to kind of, put people on their toes, do you really need to do things that way? Or is there like a better way that like maybe you've never thought of before? Is kind of like who I am.
So you've always been that way, and SE just seems to correlate with that nicely for you.
Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. Are there any conversations that you don't enjoy that happen in the SE space? Any topics that you feel are just not worth talking about any longer, or any ideas
Um,
that are not worth engaging with anymore?
I don't know that there's none that aren't worth engaging. I would say the only thing is like if you're doing SE and you have like a dishonest interlocutor, and I say dishonest, not that they're like actively lying, but they're like the psychology of themselves, that they're lying to themselves and not realizing it.
Hmm.
So you could be asking them questions and they're answering it like what they seem to be genuinely answering, and seems like a good answer to themselves, but you realize isn't really such a good question. But like in SE form, like it's not practice to like say, wait, that doesn't make any sense, like that's lying, or that doesn't answer the question, right?
Yeah, I often find that there's a distinction between people that feel that they need to represent a view as opposed to actually holding a view. And if they're representing a view, then they're not really engaging with it in the conversation in a meaningful way. I think it's interesting to notice. Yeah, for sure. So with your kind of I was gonna ask a different question, but I might what's been the most enjoyable conversation or effective conversation you've had so far? Whether it's changed somebody else's mind, or maybe changed your mind, or just made you think differently about something.
Yeah, I would say consciousness. When looking into philosophy, there's lots of, this could be the case or this could be the case. And then there's like what top neuroscientists are saying, and like what drives the medical field forward. And like when you actually start getting into it, and it's like, wait, this isn't really the hard problems of consciousness. This is a lot better understand than you would think. And like that was a kind of an epiphany moment for me. Which led to a couple of different, full course lectures that I've listened to on neuroscience and the human brain. And it's like, yeah, like we've probed like individual neurons in some cases, and like have know like what an exact neuron might contribute to our brain. Yeah.
Neurons are amazing. I wish more people spent. I mean, you often hear the religious sort of arguments from design people talk about the human eye. Just talk about the elegance of a neuron. It's just absolutely breathtaking. That might be a more persuasive argument if we could allow for such a thing. But yeah, it's interesting. So I've never had a formal education. I left school effectively at 16. Everything I've picked up is autodidactic, as it were. How about yourself? Is that similar? You're nodding your head. I assume it's a familiar story.
Very similar. Too close to home. I always say that like I didn't actually graduate high school. I mean, I have my diploma and I graduated, but I dipped off and didn't actually do what I needed to do. I never applied myself because the work wasn't interesting and wasn't informative. So yeah, I enjoy educating myself, so I like to read and watch YouTube videos.
100%. Yeah. Have you got any recommendations for YouTube videos or books or podcasts or any what are your go-tos? What are your guilty intellectual pleasures?
Oh, there's just too many to listen. I like there's a handful of YouTube chemistry channels that I like to watch. And there's a Sabrina Horror I forget what her name is, but it's like science without the gobbledygook. And she's a particle physicist, and like she simplifies things really well, and demystifies a lot of the gobbledygook. And she's very non-biased, to the point that like some of her peers are critical of her because they feel that she could be doing negative impact on science because of her like being so non-biased. And it's like, well,
interesting. Yeah, that's a challenging problem. It is remarkable how much of an education seems like the wrong way to frame it in any case, but how much you can learn through just engaging with online content, just YouTube videos and books and things. I personally was somewhat inspired by Dawkins's The God Delusion, which I sort of picked up ironically, but I think there was a lot of interesting things in that book that made me think differently about the relationship between me as an atheist and religion, and more to the point, I guess it was sort of a key part of it, which was this my sense of being an atheist apparently means I don't get to vote on matters where somehow theology does get an overwhelming say. So, if matters of social consequence, like things like classically abortion, for example, are being discussed, or the right to divorce or what have you, then, the the BBC at the time wouldn't fail to have a bishop or something, of the sort, and maybe some representatives from a bunch of other religious organizations to give their thoughts on this, and yet there was rarely an atheist on the stage. There was no group that was sort of invoked in that way, and I definitely recall feeling like I had noticed that without noticing it. So yeah, that was quite transformative for me, I think. And then from Dawkins, I think, to Hitchens, who I've always found quite charming and compelling and interesting. So yeah, do you have a similar journey from kind of just inquiry to did you find any interesting stepping stones along your path?
Of course, there's none that are necessarily ringing to my ears at this point. I think one of the more interesting lectures that I listened to was, I think it was through Harvard University or maybe Stanford, but it was Death with Shelley Keegan. And he does a really good job of simplifying a lot of philosophy points, using good examples, and then presenting all of the different cases, like this is what, the dualist would think, this is what the physicalist would think, and what describes, each of those models. But I haven't actually read the God Delusion or even, the Manual for Creating Atheists or,
right, yeah.
I just, I don't necessarily have any interest in that. I like to explore, what science has to know, and what that's the thing. Like, recently there was the fusion milestone, which was neat, but again, media gets a hold of this stuff and like, okay, we did this thing, and it's like, wait, that's not it. It's not at all what they're telling you it is. Like, it's very insignificant.
So I definitely feel like I'd like to have told my younger self that, education really starts after you leave school, and that if you're serious about it. And I wish I'd have been more confident that I was, almost allowed, if you like, to engage with some of these subjects and ideas, because I understand that for a lot of people, it just doesn't feel like this is a domain that you're even allowed to enter into. Even just talking about the word philosophy is quite intimidating to some people, and yet people will engage in philosophy on a daily basis, on all kinds of topics. Is there anything that you think you would like to have told your younger self? Is there anything you would have wished to convey or inspire young Sushi to engage with earlier?
Be you, ask questions. Critical thinking. I think being yourself is like probably one of the most beneficial pieces of advice. I think that I wish I would have, taken advice from myself if I could, but yeah, like to have learned philosophy, like when I was a kid, like, wow, like the milestones that I would have, been able to achieve, rather than holding on to some of this, other like supernatural ideas of the world. And it's like, wait, like there's answers out there. Like, we have answers, but like only if you're willing to ask questions and explore them,
I definitely, as somebody who didn't grow up religious, I've never had to emancipate myself from a religious idea, and I've got tremendous respect for those that have had to do that and go through those journeys, and I think it's not something we should take lightly. But I can assure you that even as somebody that's had a relatively secular education and sort of upbringing, I still don't feel like I was exposed to philosophy in any meaningful way, and I had to sort of discover it for myself, and it made me very angry, I think, to discover that people had all these interesting thoughts and nobody had told me, and this wasn't apparently deemed important for me to know, and yet apparently, English literature classes, reading Macbeth for the 400th time was worth our time. I do not understand why Bertrand Russell wasn't on the curriculum. Why were we not talking about Socrates? Why were we not talking about Plato? Yeah, it's deeply frustrating. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I am so with you on that idea. But I think part of the problem is like, because like I've brought this up with people after like learning it, and like people around me, and it's like, philosophy is so critical to like understanding how to ask questions. And most people have this bad idea about philosophy, that it's entirely useless. It's people getting paid to think about unanswerable questions, and it's like that is not the case at all. It's about asking questions and thinking about them, so that way we can create new sciences, because a science is just a philosophy that's been proven, you know.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. This whole idea, I think, one of the things I think is really charming about street epistemology and its community is that it is a good inroad to, I think, discovering new ways of engaging with science, philosophy, physics, everything, because the community is so eager to learn. SE seems to be certainly attract a lot of people that want to talk about these ideas, and it certainly seems to have introduced a lot of philosophy to a lot of people who otherwise probably would never have had the excuse, if you will, to engage with it. And I think it's great for that, if nothing else. Awesome. In terms of other things about Sushi, hobbies, pastimes, you mentioned did you say free climbing? Was it rock climbing or
rock climbing? Yeah,
rock climbing.
Yeah.
Awesome. Any other pastime passions, music or video games, or you a avid TV watcher?
I have lots and lots of hobbies. No ballet.
Ballet.
No ballet. I like astrophotography, long
awesome.
exposure photography, a ham radio operator.
Cool.
Computer enthusiast, gamer.
I think I'm supposed to ask you a call sign now. What's your?
You could ask me my call sign. Yeah.
What's your call sign?
Kilo Charlie 3 Lima November Echo.
Nice.
All right. CQ CQ CQ. This is Kilo Charlie 3 Lima November Echo. Kilo Charlie 3 Lima November Echo. You got a copy?
That's nice. No, if you're not calling in an airstrike, though, I'm going to be deeply disappointed. That's it. That should be the prelude to calling in an airstrike. That's it, or nuking something from orbit. Either way.
Yeah.
Cool. So long exposure photography sounds like a lot of fun. I've definitely dabbled very, very amateurly in that space. I enjoy photography myself, but yeah, like when you suddenly realize how much more there is to see in the sky that you can't see yourself, and that if you get the camera to do a little bit of trickery, you can. Yeah, it's remarkable.
When I first got my camera hooked up to my first telescope, and I photographed the Orion Nebula, and I did like a 5-minute exposure on it, and like I didn't know what to expect. It's one thing to see a picture online, and it's like, oh my God, that's out there, and it's like I dropped to my knees and I cried, like I was just because it's such a large object in the sky.
Yeah.
And there's something called the overview effect that like the astronaut experience, which is basically once they get out into space and they come to that realization, like, oh my gosh, like look at this, the Earth, it's there, it's huge, and they realize like their insignificance and yet their significance in the world, and it's a very humbling experience. And yeah.
There's a thing about the flat Earth movement that I think is a sort of argument from almost the absence of that revelation, right? It's all of the pictures of space things are just in books, and it's all very constructed and curated and issued. But when you can strap your camera to your telescope and point it into space and let it do its thing, and then you've really taken a picture, and then I can totally understand how that sudden connection to that, the reality of that being there is genuinely, I could imagine being very, very overwhelming. And I wish more people would do things like that. I think to feel connected to the universe in that if that is literally the definition of awe-inspiring, right? That has to, if awe-inspiring means something, it must mean the experience you have there, because what else is there? And it's beautiful as well. The universe is just stunning. It's full of color and light and just mysterious, weird stuff and shimmers. And yeah, I'm really excited about the James Webb telescope, as I'm sure everybody is. It's just tantalizingly so slow, and it's this remarkable sort of flower that's unveiling itself, and it's just getting itself ready. And it's the biggest tease that there's been in science for ages. But But oh my gracious, I'm so excited to see what it can see. And they recently did you see the mirror alignment photos that came out of it? And it's like, it's really there. And they took a photograph of the mirrors
itself?
from it. It was
Yes.
like selfie
Oh.
in space. It was so good. So
I've never
so
thought
good.
about calling it a selfie in space. That's totally what it was.
It
Oh
was
my
totally a safe space. Safe space.
The most
Space
expensive
selfie.
selfie. Yeah.
It was a little 20 million or something, which is it's a remarkable but again, look, I really do wish more people would do as you did and strap the camera and actually realize that these things are discoverable yourself, and I think that it's that, I don't know, there's a weird abstraction I think that most people have to these kinds of ideas in science and physics and things that mean that it's unnecessarily too much of an argument from authority for most people, and actually they don't really feel connected to it. And I think that kind of feeling leads to flat earth style narratives existing. But yeah, that's super cool. Sushi, this has been an absolute joy. Any final words for the SE community? Any final thoughts?
Keep asking questions.
Keep asking that is an awesome sign off. Sushi, it's been a real pleasure, mate. Thank you so much for doing this. I'm going to do a few more of these and see how they go, but I think it's been a fun experiment, and in any case I get to talk to lovely people like yourself, so it's a win-win for me in any case. Take care. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Cheers.